Before we get into today's video, just a quick reminder that the best way to support the channel is to subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, and leave a comment letting me know your thoughts on the upcoming topic. You can also catch me over on Twitch, streaming every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesdays at 5 p.m. to 12 a.m., and Saturdays for my weekly 2 p.m. to 12 a.m. mega stream. Now, on to today's video. Hello there, and welcome back to the Codex. So, Khora is one of the frames, of course, being a exalted frame, or rather a pseudo-exalted to now exalted frame, that was affected by the Coda Encore update. She is potentially, in terms of her technical max damage potential, one of the most nerfed frames from the update. However, she's still very good, as you're about to see. Three of the things that we lost regarding her, again, max-end possible damage that she used to be able to do was, one, we used the Magistar Incarnon, and we got the stats from the final evolution carrying over to her Whipclaw, so we lost that 16% extra base crit chance and that plus 1x base crit multiplier, which was a huge buff because mods scale off of that. Also, since it was a pseudo-exalted, you could use things like my Insane Riven here. I can no longer benefit from this 300% melee damage and 300% crit damage, which was a massive buff again. And you can no longer benefit from Magus Regress, which again is 300% melee crit damage, and once you activated this, it was permanently applied to Whipclaw for the rest of the mission. But even with all of that no longer affecting her, she's still incredibly good. So let's go ahead and talk about that. First of all, the Archon Shards. Now you'll see I'm using 4 Talforged Violets here. I bet you think it's all crit shards. It's not. 2 of them are crit shards. The melee critical damage, which again is doubled if you have over 500 energy, which this build does, so 2 of these is giving you about 150% melee crit damage. The other 2 of these, of these, though, I can speak, I promise, is the Equilibrium Shard. So since we're running 2 of these Talforged, this is giving you a 60% health orb to energy conversion, and vice versa. This is critically important to the energy economy of this build, because it gives us a ton of energy when paired with a Helmet ability that we'll talk about in a moment here, and it frees us up from not having to use Equilibrium. The last shard is Casting Speed, which is really nice, primarily if you want to be using Strangledome here, which we do want to be using Strangledome occasionally, at least, because we're using the Pilfering Strangledome augment. We're using her 2 incredibly good augments, which is Pilfering Strangledome, which is helpful if you are ever doing a loot run on her, for example, or even if you're not going on a specific loot farm. More loot's always nice. It also will give you more health orbs, more energy orbs, or actually it probably won't give you more health orbs because those aren't the normal enemy drop, but it'll give you more enemy orbs, though. Energy orbs. Again, I can speak, I promise. And then, of course, you want to use Accumulating Whipclaw. This is just a massive damage bonus. You basically cannot make a core build without using this. We also pair this with Arcane Fury for another 180% melee damage. So again, we're stacking lots of damage here before we even get to the Whipclaw build itself. Now, this is a shield gating version of the build, so that's why we're utilizing Brief Respite plus Catalyzing Shields. We're also using Blind Rage, even though none of the abilities on this kit really even need strength. We're using this specifically because we actually want the negative efficiency, because by making Whipclaw cost more and pairing that with Brief Respite plus an Augur mod on the Warframe and then 2 Augur mods on your secondary, that actually makes every single cast of Whipclaw give you your full catalyzing shield gate back, because it's able to give you that 93 shields back, which means you, on every cast, get that 1.33 second full shield gate. So it makes it very hard to die. Basically, the only thing that can kill you is Toxin procs, since they ignore shields, of course. Prime Flow to make sure that we have that 500 plus energy to activate those Violet Shards. And then the combination of Overextended plus Augur Reach. Augur Reach, again, is really nice for the shield conversion. But also this gives us the 200% range that we need, because you want to have at least 200% range, because that is the capped range for the Whipclaw explosion radius. So you can take it from 5 to 10 meters. So that way you get the largest AoE you can get. If you want to, you could save a mod slot. You could drop Augur Reach, although you wouldn't have your full shield gate, and you would only have 190 range, which is like a 9.5 out of the 10 meters. I wanted to get that full range, though, and I want the shield gate effect, so I keep them both on. That's pretty much it for the main build here. The continuity is primarily just for the Lycath's Hunt Duration and Strangledome. Now, speaking of the Lycath, that is the Helmet ability that we're using to replace her 3rd ability. Replacing the 3rd ability doesn't actually really have a downside, because replacing Venari's ability doesn't actually remove Venari. It only removes the ability to change the way that Venari behaves, which is basically irrelevant, so it's a free helmet slot. Lycath's Hunt is incredible on Core because it gives you a 50% chance every time you kill an enemy that has at least 5 stats effects on them, drop a health orb, and when you pair that with the equilibrium shards that we're using for 2 of our Archon Shards, this basically resolves into you having infinite energy. Now, we're using Aegis and Fury for the arcanes. Like I said, of course, Fury is going to help Whipclaw. Aegis, you could kind of call this a flex slot. If you want to change this to something else, you can. This just gives you another layer of keeping your shields up even outside of the casting it specifically from Whipclaw, so it just makes you even tankier. But if you want to, you can flex that out, replace that with whatever you feel like. Now, one of the reasons why the equilibrium effect is going to be so good paired with the Lycaths is because we're using the Doriga companion here. So Doriga with Arc Coil and Manifold Bond. Arc Coil is going to be going off basically constantly, and thanks to Manifold Bond, both reducing its cooldown, which is the reason why it's going to go off constantly, but Manifold Bond also applies all of the status effects from your companion's weapon onto your companion's damaging ability. So it's not only going to be an electric proc, but it's also going to be a cold, radiation, corrosive, and magnetic proc from this Tazakor build that we're using here. And since we also have assault mode on the companion itself, it's going to be actually shooting the Tazakor as well. So you'll also be applying in an AoE because the Tazakor is a chaining weapon, and we added punch there to it. You'll be applying normally cold, radiation, corrosive, and magnetic. So it's very nice. You're going to have a ton of stats effects, and this will enable you to passively, very easily have those 5 stats effects that you need for Lycath's Hunt to, you won't even really need to prime enemies. So super easy to keep up. If you do need to prime enemies, though, you can use this Cedo build. Fire off the alt fire. Shivering Contagion on here. It's very nice for the Cedo itself because the Cedo, even though it's not modded for cold, its alt fire applies all 4 different base elements. So you will apply cold on the Cedo itself, but also this is actually a global buff. So this will apply to the cold procs from your Tazakor's weapon and from the Coolant Link mod that we have on. I think I just said link again. Coolant Leak. I don't know why that mod is so hard for me to say. This will apply to the cold procs that your companion applies, making them turn into an AoE, so it's very nice. Now, just to go over in more detail here, because I didn't actually really specify on the Doriga build. So we also have Synth Deconstruct here. This is even more health orbs, so again, even more sustain. Momentous Bond on here is another reason why we're going to easily be able to have 5+ stats effects on enemies, because every time you kill an Eximus, you're going to give your Doriga a random extra damage type to its weapon. So if that happens to be a damage type that you didn't already have modded on, like Gas, for example, that's another +1 unique status type. Guardian is again going to help with your shield regen. So on top of your Augur mods, on top of your Aegis, you have this also restoring your shield. So you are super, super shield gate tanky. And in terms of the Doriga keeping itself alive, along with the Bond mods having different revive effects, we're using Calculated Redirection plus Accelerated Deflection, which I just took off an accident, so let's put that back on, giving it its own decent little shield gate, of course, and you want to use primed regen. In terms of the primary and secondary, aside from what we already said about the Cedo, just make sure that you have the Dexterity Arcanes on, because again, Whipclaw does count as a melee, so using primary and secondary Dexterity will help you keep your combo up basically indefinitely when you pair that with the Naramon Focus Skull. And again, your secondary doesn't matter at all. Just make sure that you have both of the Augur mods on and the Dexterity Arcane. You don't have to specifically use the Epitaph. I would recommend using the Cedo, though, as your primary in the melee. The one good thing about stat sticks not existing anymore, meaning that you no longer need to use the Magister for Khora, means that we can go back to using the Praetos as a movement stat stick. So I just use this basically to get the free sprint speed, slide speed, and most importantly, the 30% parkour velocity. This actually freed up an Archon Shard slot on my Khora, which is one of the reasons why I was able to show you the current shard setup that I'm using. So we actually got some nice quality of life there by, not being forced to use the Magistar, essentially. Now onto the Venari build here. I know this is a lot of builds. We're almost done. The Venari build here, fairly basic build. One mod that we don't usually use on a lot of our companions, if you're not melee focused, is Prime Pack Leader, since we are, again, playing as Khora. This is actually a fantastic survivability. I will point out, the Prime version of this mod is basically useless. The only reason why this mod matters is because you give your companion Overguard, and since no matter how much Overguard you have, whenever you lose Overguard, whether it's 1 or 10 billion, you get a half-second Overguard gate. So the fact that this mod gives more Overguard than regular Pack Leader doesn't actually matter. So this is actually basically a useless Prime mod, and if you want to save space and save Endo, just use the regular version of the mod. I just put it on here because I'm able to, basically. Now, we are using link redirection, even though we are using a catalyzing shield setup on Khora, which means she has very little shields. Venaria by default has 0 shields. You can see if I take this off, she has no shields. So she has no shield gate to help her stay alive. So putting on redirection, even though it is only giving her a 0.8 second shield gate, that is an extra 0.8 seconds of invulnerability that she now has that she wouldn't have otherwise. And she's able to regen that a lot faster thanks to haste and deflection, so that's why that is on there. Now, in terms of these other mods, this is actually not supposed to be Tech Enhanced. That is supposed to be Tech Assault. There we go. Tech Assault is on here because this gives her a chance to basically just completely ignore dying. A 60% chance to ignore lethal damage. Is very nice. Momentous Bond, again, this will just help you revive her faster if she goes down, and it'll also give your Venari extra random damage types, which, again, this is just more layers of status application from your companions to make sure that you can passively keep that Lycaths up. Now, we are using Tenacious Bond here, so this gives us a free extra 1.2x crit multiplier. You definitely want to use this, especially with Khora's critical tiers being nerfed. This is actually stronger than it used to be, because it's now providing effectively a larger portion of our total damage because of the quote-unquote nerfs that we got. Contagious Bond just gives you a little bit of status spread, and of course, Fetch is on here. Since we're using Fetch on Venari, that's why I didn't have Vacuum on Doriga, so keep that in mind. Do not put Vacuum on your Doriga or whatever companion you decide to use if you're not copying this exactly, because there's no reason to have... They don't stack or anything, so thanks to Venari having this on, it frees up that mod slot on your normal companion. Now, Restorative Bond here, this is kind of a flex slot. I put this on here because we're going to be dropping so many health orbs, thanks to both Synth Deconstruct on the Doriga and Lycath's Hunt, making our kills drop health orbs, that if Venari does happen to go down, she's going to get back up almost instantly between this and Momentous Bond, because we're going to pick up so many health orbs that 3-second reduction per orb is going to be insane, actually, and she'll just instantly pop back up. So you'll notice this if she goes down. It's quite nice. The Claw build here is basically just the regular meta heat slash build, nothing that you wouldn't expect. So your Venari will actually kill guys with this, because this is actually quite a high damage build, along with additionally adding heat and slash procs towards that 5 status stacks that you need on enemies for, again, Lycath's Hunt, so it's very nice. Now, finally, on to the Whipclaw build here. I know we're yapping. So, this is an interesting Whipclaw build. You can see I'm using Melee Duplicate. We're not going an Influence build. I do have an Influence build here, but since a lot of the time you're going to one-shot guys with Whipclaw, Influence basically doesn't actually work. Because Influence has an issue where if you instantly kill a guy in one hit, it just won't spread electric procs. So it doesn't actually work super well on Khora. So Duplicate, though, is very interesting. I paired this with a Blast build, and as you can see here, this Blood Rush is only rank 4. It's not max rank. The reason why I did that is because I actually want to have as close to exactly 100% crit chance as possible. And on this build, between a rank 4 Blood Rush and a maxed out Galvanized Steel, this is about 103% crit chance. So almost all of the time, Duplicate is going to go off and your Whipclaw is going to hit twice. And since this Whipclaw build has something like 170% status chance or something like that, once Weeping Wounds and Galvanized Elementalists are stacked up, you're basically doubling that thanks to Duplicate. So this is a lot of blast procs, so you're going to get a lot of extra AoE added to the Whipclaw radius, which is really nice because that effectively means that since blast procs are a 5-meter AoE, if you kill an enemy at the very edge of your Whipclaw's normal 10-meter radius, you're basically adding another extra 5 meters to that. So your Whipclaw is now effectively up to 15 meters wide. So it's very nice. Extra AoE on top of your AoE. It's pretty sick. Now, there's a few other builds here, though. The one that I'm going to showcase to you is going to be Duplicate, but another interesting choice is replacing Organ Shatter with Magnetic Rush, and then change the Arcane to Vortex. Then you have Magnetic and Blast. Whenever Magnetic goes off, you have a 45% chance for Vortex to suck enemies into a clump, and then you just keep nuking them. So as you keep going through the map and blowing guys up, whenever you proc Magnetic, you have a chance to clump them up in front of you, basically. And then it basically primes them for your next Whipclaw attack to hit even more guys, thanks to that innate clumping ability that you have. Also, if you want to go just full raw damage build, you could use something like this, where you use Exposure, you use Prime Fever Strike, and North Wind for just a bunch of raw viral damage. Use a Smite mod for another massive multiplier. We go back to Organ Shatter and Gladiator Might. No status whatsoever. Just full damage on top of, again, the 240% corrosive from Exposure. You're just going to one-tap everything with pure raw damage on this. And then the fortification build, we'll talk about that later. First of all, let's go back to duplicate here. Now we're going to finally hop into a mission on Conjunction Survival per usual, and I'll show you how effective this shield gating duplicate blast setup truly is. Alright, so here we are in the mission, and you can see my Tazakor companion is already going hard with the status application. And the damage and status application of my Whipclaw itself on Khora is quite funny. I'm up to 12x combo here, which that is one of the things that they made much more streamlined with the Encore update. Speaking of which, is rather than Khora's Whipclaw scaling with normal combo hits now, so you used to have to actually, like, land 220 hits. Now it has the same combo system that Atlas and Gara both have. All three of them share the same thing, where every hit that you land on an enemy adds 20 combo hits to your Whipclaw. So it's 20, 40, 68, so it's really easy to get up to the 12x now, just using Whipclaw itself, as opposed to used to primarily do it with your regular melee. So that's nice. You can see there's lots and lots of blast procs going off here, thanks to the very high status chance paired with almost always hitting twice. So we're getting a huge amount of blast procs. We're also getting some slash procs occasionally, some puncture procs, etc. Which is fine, but it's mostly blast procs, thanks to the weighting that it has. And again, that's just an extra AoE that we're getting. And we're not even sacrificing damage either, because the funny thing about duplicate is that part of the, quote-unquote nerf, and I keep saying quote-unquote because clearly Khora still dominates everything. The funny thing about the new math of Khora is that now that we're not hitting red crits ever, on normal builds at least, of course you could use like Wrathful Advance or something, but since we're not able to hit red crits anymore, with just mods for the most part, hitting 2 yellow crits with duplicate is actually more damage than hitting a single orange crit. So we're not even... This is actually the highest damage build as well, compared to not using duplicate. Well, obviously you'd be using exposure or something, but in terms of 2 yellow crits versus 1 orange crit, this is actually more damage, because for example, if you have a 4x crit multiplier, doing an orange crit would be 7x, because the way that critical multipliers work is that you get your critical multiplier -1 added on for every tier. So going from a 4x yellow to an orange would be 4 minus 1 is 3. So then 4 plus 3 would be a 7x orange crit. But with duplicate, you would just be hitting 2 4x's, which is a total of 8x. And again, since it's 2 distinct hits, they can both apply status, so it's a lot more, like literally twice as much rather, status application, which is the main point of this build, is we want a lot of blast procs to add that AoE to our already existing AoE. So you're really not sacrificing anything by doing this build. It's basically all pure profit, pure winning. So it's very nice. Now, enough of this build. This is the shield gating version of the build. If you want to go to like even level 10,000, for example, this is the build that you would take, because it survives off of shield gating and not health tanking. So it scales infinitely, because as long as you keep casting, you keep getting that invulnerability gate back. So really the only thing that can kill you is Toxin. But some of you out there don't like shield gating. You prefer health tanking. You like it. You think it's more simplified. I do think shield gating is really easy on Khora, but for those of you that asked for it, I am going to show you a health tanking build. So for the health tank version of Khora, we're going to switch from catalyzing shields, pilfering Strangledome, and blind rage over to vitality, quick thinking, and adaptation, and we change the arcanes to arcane battery and arcane reaper. Now one of the reasons why we're still using prime flow on here, even though we are using batteries, because you need to have unconditional 500 or higher energy for the double crit bonus from Violet Shards to be active, which is actually a mistake that I made on the Atlas video, but I corrected it underneath in the comments. So for those of you that watch that, just keep that in mind. Your energy does need to be 500 or higher in the arsenal before the mission starts to get that double crit bonus. You still do get a benefit, though, out of all this massive amount of energy stacking, because we are using quick thinking, so your energy effectively turns into health for you if they get your health down to 2, and then they start draining your energy. So this is effectively just another health mod, along with vitality, so it serves a dual purpose here, which is nice. Now, Arcane Reaper gives us 660 armor and 24 health a second regen, so this helps a lot with our health sustain, paired with the massive amount of armor that we're going to have. Speaking of a massive amount of armor, scaling into battery as well, we're also changing the Whipclaw build over to a fortification build, melee fortification. So it's nearly the same build in terms of the mods here, Basically, the only thing we changed is that since we're no longer using duplicates, so we want a specific crit chance, I switched over to Gladiator Might to get a little bit of that crit chance bonus back, and of course we're going back to a max rank Blood Rush. Other than that, using essentially the same kind of blast setup. So Fortification, what it does is it gives you 210 armor on every melee kill, and each stack lasts for 10 seconds. This has no cap on it at all. So if you kill 50 guys, you can get 50 stacks of 210 armor. It's actually insane how easy it is to keep thousands of armor stacked up. For example, it's basically impossible on Khora to go below 10 stacks, and even only 10 stacks is 2,100 armor on top of what Reaper is giving you, for example. So your battery is going to be constantly maxed out. You're going to be super health tanky for the massive amount of armor this is giving you. This is the build for people that hate shield gating, basically. So let's hop into a mission. Again, Sam 1, and I'll show this to you. Alright, so here we are in the mission. You can see that right now I have over 1,000 energy. In fact, we have almost 1,500 energy. You can see it dips back down, of course, if I stop killing guys, because a lot of the armor we have is conditional. So you need to keep getting those Whipclaw kills to keep those stacks of Fortification up, to keep up that energy, of course, and to keep Arcane Reaper proccing. But when it is all the way up, you have approximately 1,500 energy, which is insane, and that is a lot of health from quick thinking as well, because if they actually manage to get past your heavily armor buffed 930 health, that 1,500 energy, every point of that from quick thinking counts as 2.4 points of health. So that's over 3,000 health. You can see we're actually at almost 1,650 energy, so even more than the 1,500 that I was stating earlier. So over 3,500, 4,000-ish health, basically, from that energy to health conversion that quick thinking effectively gives. And quick thinking is affected by armor, so all of that massive amount of armor is also applying to your energy when it's being drained as health. So this build is basically the health tank immortal version of Khora for those of you that don't want to do shield gating. The nice benefit of this build as opposed to the shield gating build, even though this won't scale as far in terms of infinite survivability that shield gating gives you for, like, you know, level 10,000, for example, this is more chill survivability, because since you don't have to constantly keep that shield gate up, meaning if you make a mistake, you go down. If I sit here for, you know, 5 seconds, for example, not whipclawing, they're still not going to be able to kill me instantly because of all of that passive armor that I still have stacked up. So it is a more chill playstyle. It's really good if you don't want to go into super high levels. Even if you want to go multiple hours in a Steel Path mission, this build will serve you just fine. You know, if you want to do 2 hours in a survival like this, for example, due to the sheer massive amount of armor that this build is giving you, primarily because of, again, the Fortification Arcane that you're sacrificing some damage for, which, as you can see, is not really an issue. We're still hitting millions. Thanks to that Arcane, you have so much armor that you're actually making this health tank setup completely beyond viable on Khora. So I just want to give that to you guys as a secondary option for those of you that don't, like I said, don't like shield gating, don't care about, you know, going to level 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, etc. content. That's about it. Yeah, Khora is still incredible in my opinion. While her maximum damage was technically nerfed from the Encore update, the fact that they made her much more streamlined to use, that you can directly see Whipclaw, you understand that you need to mod Whipclaw directly now. It's simpler to understand, it's better for new players, it's more streamlined. I think they did a great job with basically all of the frame conversions, turning them from pseudo-exalt into exalts. And she still does plenty of damage, as you can see. Survivability is great, energy economy is great. I really can't complain too much. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I know it was a lot of yapping, but that's just because there's so many different builds to go over with Khora because of all of the things she has to form and whatnot. Hopefully you found it useful. If you did, let me know down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.